A very good morning, children. Children, if you remember, yesterday we started with a new topic in English grammar, active voice and passive voice. Today we shall continue with the same topic. But before we do that, let's review of what we've already done. We did the introduction, what is an active voice and what is passive voice. We saw to some simple rules how to change a voice, right? Then we did verb phrases in active and passive voice. There was a table that was given to you and I told you to write it down in your notebook. So I hope you've done that. Then we have changed the voice with direct and indirect object. So when you have a sentence with two objects, one is direct and one is indirect, you have two answers also, right? Both the answers are right. So we have seen that too. And we even saw change of voice with modal auxiliaries. Today we shall just move on and we'll revise with one sentence, okay? Again, let's look at this sentence. The dog chased the cat. Now, which is the subject here? The dog. Chased is the verb phrase. Object, the cat. Now, first we are going to do what? First, identify the sentence, whether it is active or passive. Who is doing the action here? You're going to ask the question. The dog is doing the action. So if the dog is doing the action and if the dog is in the subject, what voice is it? Active voice. Yes. So emphasis is on the doer or the performer. The one who's doing the action is called the doer or the performer. So this is an active voice. Now the same sentence, let's see it in the passive voice. The cat was chased by the dog. The cat is the subject. Was chased is a verb phrase and the dog is the agent. So here we see the emphasis is on the result or the receiver, the cat. The cat is receiving the action, no, by the dog. So here, which voice is it? It is the passive voice. Now let me tell you children, sometimes in the passive voice, we may not have the verb phrase by, alright? So sometimes the by phrase in the passive voice can be left out. Change of voice of interrogative sentence. Now what are interrogative sentences? Those are the ones which are questions, right? With a question mark. So when you are asked to change the voice of a question, remember that the sentence with the changed voice should also be a question. You have to recognize which is the subject in the sentence, whether the sentence is in the active voice or passive voice, and then make the changes accordingly. Now, when you have an interrogative sentence, let's look at this example. Where did they find this ring? Now, you just divide it. Look into the sentence carefully. The question word is where. Where did? Subject, they. Word phrase, find. And the object, you have this ring. Now, you need to find out whether it is active or passive. Now, you have to go and ask who is doing the action. They. So it is obviously object. Okay, it is an active voice. Then you make it into passive. Now when you make it into passive, the subject will go into the predicate, no, the second half. So where was this ring found? By them. So you see in the case when we are changing an interrogative sentence, when you change it into passive, the sentence will always remain interrogative. You cannot make it into any other kind. Please remember this, okay? Now, change of voice in imperative sentence. Now, what are imperative sentence? Imperative sentence are those with a command or a request. So, while changing the voice of an imperative sentence, we add let at the beginning of the passive voice construction. Let's understand this with an example. Do the work. Now, if I have to ask you children, what is the subject? You say, teacher, there's no subject. Yes, you're right. There's no subject in this sentence. So, you have to presume that the subject is you. Any subject. You do the work. Okay? So, do the work is an active voice. Now, it is an imperative sentence because it is giving you like a command, no? Do the work. So when you have sentences that are imperative, you have to make it passive by using the word let. Let the work be done. So you made it passive now, right? So let the work be done by you. It can be that way also, children, but we have not put it by you because we say, sometimes it's not necessary to put by and the subject there in the passive voice. Let's take another example. Close the gate. It's an active voice. Now what will be the subject here? Yes, in this case also we have to presume that it is you. Okay, so close the gate, it is like a command. Okay, so let the gate be closed. So you made it into passive voice. So in an imperative sentence, please remember, when you're changing it into passive voice, we use the word let. Now uses of the passive. We've seen so much of the active. Let's see about passive now. Now passive for focus. When do we use passive? We use the passive voice when we wish to focus on a happening which is more important to us than who or what causes the happening, or when there is simply no need to mention the doer. Now let's understand this with an example. Our cottage was damaged in last night's storm. Now in the sentence, are they telling you who's doing the action in the first half? No. They're talking about our cottage was damaged. They're talking about something that happened. Okay. So more important is given to what? The happening rather than the one who is doing the action. If you see, the action is done by what? The storm. But we're not giving importance to that in the first half of the sentence. So in the passive voice, focus is given to the happening. Now second example, my car was stolen by the thief. Now, my car was stolen, it's a happening, right? Something has happened which we are reporting. But we are not talking about the doer. We are not giving so much importance to the thief here. In the first half, we mentioned about the happening. So, my car was stolen by the thief. Second is passive to avoid vague words as subjects. We always prefer the passive when we wish to avoid using a vague word as subject, like someone or a person, etc. Now suppose you have to write a sentence and you have to use a word someone or a person. Now that is very vague, okay, very uncertain and very indefinite. Therefore, we avoid using these words. So when do we write? How do we write it then? After my talk, I was asked to explain a point I had made. Now here in this sentence, if you notice, you are not writing by someone or a person because you don't know who is it definitely, okay? So we just write, after my talk, I was asked to explain a point I had made. So you are avoiding the subject, someone or a person. Now passive in typical context, when you have formal notices and announcements, like candidates are required to present themselves half an hour before the examination begins. Now this is what? A notice given to the candidates. And if you have a notice given, it's always in the passive voice, okay? Then you have passengers are required to remain seated until the aircraft comes to a complete stop. Now this is an announcement. So when an announcement is given, it is also in a passive voice. If you see, here it is saying passengers are required. We're not saying the one who is doing the action is not mentioned in the subject. No, by whom they are requested. Right? Then we have newspaper report or headlines. Many people have been questioned in connection with the murder. Now this is like a newspaper report. We're talking about people who have been questioned. But who's questioning them is not been told to you, okay? So that is in a passive voice, we write it that way, okay? And we use even headlines like shots fired at UN mission. Are we told who fired the shot? No. But we just say shots fired at UN mission. So we are giving you a headline, okay? And headlines are given in a passive voice. Then lastly, we have scientific writing. The mixture is placed in the beaker. We are not saying who has done it, by whom. We only say the mixture is placed in the beaker. So this is a scientific writing. So in all these cases, children, we use the passive voice. So let's just recap what we've already done in the first two videos. The first video, children, we did active and passive voice refer to the form of a verb. So the verb form is very important. Then we use the active voice. When we use the active voice, the subject is the doer of the action. Always remember, never go to solve the sentence without finding out who is doing the action. So, if the action is done by the subject, then it's an active voice. When we use the passive voice, the action is done to the subject. So, in the passive voice, what happens? Action is done to the subject. And sometimes the by phrase in the passive voice can be left out. We may not have by. So children, don't get deceived here. If the word by is not there, sometimes we think, oh, when it is by means it has to be passive. But sometimes the by may not be there and it may be a passive voice. So please see that you follow the rules. Ask the question, who is doing the action. Then change of voice of interrogative sentence. We saw when we are changing into interrogative, what happens, children? The interrogative sentence will remain an interrogative. Then change of voice in imperative sentence. What happens in imperative sentence? Sometimes we don't have the subject, right? So what do? We put the word let. So let is used in imperative sentence when we are changing imperative sentences. The voice in imperative. Then use of the passive. We have passive for focus, and what we do, we focus on the happening, not on the one who's doing the, happenings. Then passive to avoid vague words. What are the vague words? We're talking about someone, okay? We don't know who the person is. So we avoid that vague words as subject by using passive voice. And of course, we saw passive in typical context, the three different contexts, formal notice and announcement. Most of the notices and announcement, children, if you see, it's given in passive voice. It's not in the active voice, okay? And newspaper reports, headlines also come in a passive voice. Then we have even scientific writing, okay? Anything to do with scientific writing, in which voice do we see it? We see it in the passive voice. So this is all about active and passive voice. I request you, children, that we have an assignment given to you. Please see that you do it. Please go through the rules. Go through this video again. If you don't understand it all at one time, please see it again. I'm sure you will understand when you solve the assignments given. Now, your assignments are very important, children. Every day we are looking into your assignments and seeing whether you're doing it. The assignments are very, very little. So please see that you do that. I know you're even preparing for your orals. Don't get stressed out. Everything is going to work fine. God be with you all. Take care. Thank you, children.